So the first thing is let's take a look at the old days, right? We'll call it the Wild West. So the UCS manager, I here's the thing. I love Cisco. I love UCS, and it's one of those things where you don't know what you want in life until you finally see it, right? You gotta see that next tier of living, right? So I was living in UCS Manager for so long, and I thought, oh man, this is so cool. It's so easy to use. I love UCSM, but then I saw Intersight. I started doing Hyperflex, and now I'm doing UCSX, and I got to tell you, compared to Intersight, the UCS Manager for me, it feels kind of archaic at this point. I don't mean to knock anything, Scott. I'm just saying the usability of the Intersight dashboard and how it brings everything together, unlike what we used to see here in UCS Manager, absolutely phenomenal. So in UCS Manager, we would bring up the Fabric interconnects. We would create those policies, right? So you might create a port channel policy. Um, we also have to create VLANs in the LAN tab, vSANs in the SAN tab. You have to go to the server tab to create the templates and the server profiles. And then you also have this organizational hierarchy where if you created something right in one org and tried to create a service profile, or if you created a policy or a pool in one org and you tried to create and use those policies in a service profile in another org, it no working, right? Oof, that was brutal, especially in a multi-org environment. Organizational, orgs were great for organizing our configuration, but that was really about all it did. So, server profiles, that's what they're talking about here is policies resolve upwards, up towards root. So, if I have something downstream, I can't use it. I can't use it if I'm in the wrong organization. So we kind of wanted to get rid of that. Another thing is, what about these default policies? You pop UCS Manager up for the first time, you get everything configured. You got all your pools, server profiles are online. Servers have, ESXi installed. Everything's awesome, but guess what? You still had some default minor and major faults. Why? Because there were default policies and pools that you didn't use. So you got that annoying button up there saying, hey, you've got all these minor and major faults, even though the system is running perfect. And that kind of always irked me, right? So we're going to notice that there is no more default policies. Granted, the default maintenance policy, being able to go in there and turn that to user ACK, that was awesome. But now with the default policies, you have to create the policy, right? You have to create the policy to be able to use it at this point. That way, we're not looking at major and minor faults for no reason because I have an empty default Mac pool that I'm not using. Who cares? I used to just go and delete those default pools if I wasn't using them, right? Just to get rid of that stinking major and minor fault warning, right? So this was just some caveats and some irks from UCS Manager. What about UCS Central? UCS Central was great because we had that policy consistency. Because we started creating these things called domain groups. You could start taking multiple UCS domains, group them together, and then push one policy, service profile template or pool down to all of my domains. That was great. I didn't really have a problem with that, right? I didn't really have a problem with the orgs as long as they were configured correctly. One of the things that I did have a problem with is moving something from one domain to another. So it's the old adage of if you're going to move VLAN something in VLAN 63 over to a new environment, you got to make sure VLAN 63 is over there, right? And a lot of the time, what would happen is, oh, well, you know what? I may have forgotten to implement VLAN or vSAN 63. So this could create an immediate outage for an entire domain, right? Or a specific subset of servers. So UCS Central was great for automating some configuration and policy instantiation, but it still had its dangers, right? So what we want to do, let's take a look at Intersight, right? Intersight, latest, greatest, newest, greatest thing since sliced bread. It has a flat organizational structure. There is no hierarchy. Intersight orgs include logical policy and hardware with respect to the user's RBAC. In other words, you can modify based upon your role-based access control. Non-disruptive to the workloads. If you make any modifications to any of this, it doesn't care. It says, hey, the servers are up. I'm not going to mess with that. Server profile configuration changes are not automatically applied. That's the thing. Remember that default maintenance policy, right? If you made a change, it instantiated immediately and then rebooted your servers. Oh boy, that was fun. Hey, let's throw some updating service profile templates on top of that. So when you update the template, it reboots all your servers. Well, we used to call that an RGE, right? Good old resume generating event. So we wanted to get away from that. I've actually had multiple customers where they did not update that maintenance policy, and then they put in like a scrub policy. Right? So every time those things rebooted, it scrubbed them, and every time they made a change, it would reboot the servers and then scrub them. Let's get away from that. That's an unneeded headache, right? So what we're going to do is anytime you make any policy or profile changes, what you're going to notice is a little blinking icon that's super annoying, but very needed. That tells you undeployed changes. You need to make sure right here that there's going to be a little flashing icon up the top right-hand corner that says you need to deploy these changes. Or better yet, you've deployed changes and now a reboot is required. One thing that we just want to show you here really quick is right here, this guy with the face to place the one time. This is your request icon. I don't know if we have anybody in California, but this used to be called the FSM, the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Okay, it's called the Finite State Machine, whatever. This is kind of the replacement for it. This is going to show you all of your requests, active requests, and then anything that's been completed within the last 24 hours. So right here, if you're applying a service profile or server profile, you'll see the deployed changes. And then you might also see it right here say reboot required. And actually we'd see that right here under the alarm, reboot is required, right? By the way, this is where we would see our alerts, right? So we just got, some warnings, some critical faults. This is where you're going to see your major and minor. Okay. But the big thing is just make sure that you're watching this tab here. Yep. Cool. So we don't have any Pastafarians in here? The Flying Spaghetti Monster? I'm sorry. I have to make that joke every time. All right. So, sorry, let me move that out of the way. There we go. All right. So, with that being said, you must administratively reboot your servers to pick up the changes? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.